Hello, we're talking about cultural relativism today. So, cultural relativism, what is it? A cultural relativist believes that people should get their morality from their cultures, that cultures make up moral rules, the standards and the morality that the members of their culture should follow. Not only that happens, that cultures do make up these rules, but that's the way it should be done. So a cultural relativist believes that every culture makes up their own moral rules. Moral just means right and wrong, good and bad. This is the right thing to do, wrong thing to do, and that they should make them up. So, for this essay, The Challenge of Cultural Relativism, this author is going to take a critical look on cultural relativism. So, our question is cultural relativism correct? And then for step 2, you have to define cultural relativism, which is actually how I started. Cultural relativists believes that ethics or morality comes and should come from one's culture. And then in step 3, we have the author's answer, which is no, cultural relativism is not correct, but it does help people have an open mind, which is a good thing. So for him, it works in most cases, but not in all cases. So, what are his criticisms on cultural relativism? He has more than 3, but we're going to start with the first 3. So step 4, what is his argument? Well, the first one, we can label this A, B, and C if you want. It denies moral progress. Why does cultural relativism deny moral progress? Well, the cultural relativism says that the cultures decide on the moral rules of its members. Not only do they decide on the moral rules, but whatever they decide is correct, because the standard of morality is the culture. And if the culture decides it, then the culture is correct, because that's what morality is. It's decided upon the cultures, which means everything that the culture decides is correct. Now, first of all, think back through history. Right there, you seem to go, not so sure that's correct. But let's stick to the first one. It denies moral progress. So if you think back to our history, at the time of slavery, the culture said slavery was morally correct. And that for the cultural relativism would be correct. That's what the culture decided. Then fast forward, now people have changed their mind and it's wrong. Under cultural relativism, once the culture changed its mind and slavery is now wrong, the culture is correct, because cultures decide. So the culture was correct when there was slavery, and the culture was correct when there's not slavery. So the culture is always correct. So there can be no moral progress. For moral progress to take place, you have to go from something being wrong to something being morally correct or morally right. But under cultural relativism, everything is right. It was right when it was happening, it was right when it wasn't happening. Because the culture gets to decide, it's always right. All right, so that's his first criticism on cultural relativism. His second one is it doesn't allow for the members of their culture to criticize their own culture. If you're in a culture, and pick whatever culture you want. Let's pick an easy one. We're going to make it up. We're in a culture that says drinking Mountain Dew is morally wrong. So let's imagine you live in this culture, but you secretly love Mountain Dew. And you drink it when you won't be caught. Now, if you follow cultural relativism, the culture gets to decide what's right and wrong. So the culture is right, Mountain Dew is wrong. So you do not have the right to go forward into the town meeting and say, Mountain Dew is moral. We should all drink it. because you can't criticize your culture because the culture already decided the Mountain Dew is wrong. So if you accept cultural relativism, you accept that the culture gets to decide for its members. So you can't criticize your own culture. For some reason, that movie, it's an old movie about dancing. Footloose. So some town decided it was morally wrong to dance, and then all the teenagers were dancing. So under cultural relativism, they should not have contradicted their culture. All right. So third one. Third reason why this author is going to say that cultural relativism is wrong is it's illogical. Think back to the logic you know. Cultural relativism rests on the belief that if people disagree on something, then there must not be a correct answer. That's the whole idea here, because culture A thinks that Mountain Dew is morally correct, and culture B thinks it's morally wrong, and cultural relativism says all cultures have the right to decide, so you can't say either one of them is right or wrong. They're both right because their culture decided it. Now, if this is correct, their logic is because cultures disagree, this one's for Mountain Dew, this one's against it, there is no answer because the cultures decided. There's no right or wrong answer about Mountain Dew because ethics are relative to the culture. Relative meaning it depends on the circumstances. So you can have this culture thinking this and this one thinking this. There's no contradiction. All is relative. There's no absolute moral standard or moral standard to go by. It's all dependent upon the cultures. Now, if you set this up in an actual argument, you can see why he says it's an illogical argument. Premise 1, Sarah believes the earth is flat. Premise 2, Sam believes the earth is round. Our conclusion is there is no correct answer about the shape of the earth. It's following the same logic as cultural relativism. Person A thinks one thing, person B thinks the opposite, so there must not be a right answer. This is a flaw to cultural relativism. It's based on an illogical framework. Just because people disagree, they're saying there's no correct answer. Well, isn't there a correct answer? So, let's go. I still have to tell you why he thinks the good part that helps you keep an open mind, but I'm going to do that in step 6. So, step 5, which is the flaw in the argument. The flaw is going to say, no, that's a bad argument example you just gave. Saying Sarah believes the earth is flat, Sam believes the earth is round, so there's no answer. Here, the flaw, the person that disagrees, is going to say, that's not like morality or ethics at all. There actually is a scientific answer to whether or not the earth is round or flat. There is not a scientific answer to whether something is right or wrong. It's all in a human's perspective. It's all relative. Science has an absolute answer. Ethics does not. So the argument is not logically flawed. It's based on based on ethics being relative. You can have one group says Mountain Dew is morally correct and one group says Mountain Dew is morally incorrect, and there is no right answer. It just depends on each culture. There is no conflict and there is no right answer. Morality does, under the cultural relativism, morality doesn't actually have a right and wrong answer. They just have what each culture comes up with. All right? So you can't say it's illogical based on that example, because that example that we just gave about the earth is based on scientific fact, and scientific fact has an answer. Ethics does not. That's the flaw. Now, the author's going to come back to this and reply. So, In step 6, he's going to say that there are some rules that transcend cultures, that all cultures agree on. And if that's the case, there's truth in it. If you imagine 10 cultures that all come to the same few rules, and they have nothing to do with each other, and they all independently come up with the same idea for what is right and wrong, doesn't that indicate that there is a right and wrong answer about morality? And because all of these independent cultures are coming up with the same thing. The reality that the author is going to say is there's not as much conflict among cultures than we normally imagine. What he's going to say is there's a lot actual agreement on, let's say, what's the way to put it? Okay, I'm going to use the example he gave in the book. There's the Galatians and then there are Greeks. Now the Galatians have a funeral practice, which is basically, I don't know how to say this exactly, but you read the essay. So the Galatians honor their dead by the people at the funeral eating a small bit of them. It's their way of a symbolic gesture of saying, I want you in me, part of me forever. Okay? So the point here is, it's a symbolic gesture of saying, I want you part of my life forever. And if you tell this idea to, say, the Greeks who believe in, what do they call it when you burn the dead? My mind just went blank on a word I know. I'm going to move on. So, the Greeks burn their dead, and then kind of like we do now, and they keep the ashes and honor them that way. And if the Greeks heard about the Galatians, they would be horrified because they think that's horrible. You just don't eat your dead. And then the Galatians are going to say, oh my God, you don't burn your dead? That's horrible. So you have two different groups who are saying the other one is wrong. But are they really saying, is that really the case? Think about it. Is there a right answer to this? Both groups, what do they have in common? They both want to honor their dead. What they have is a difference in opinion about how you honor the dead. One says, ingest them a little bit, and the other one says, incinerate them? This is sounding so weird, but you get the idea. All right? So what they agree on is the value of honoring the dead. How they do it is different. And if you look through different examples, you'll see that cultures will have similar values, but they might have different ways of showing them. So this author's going to say there's actually less conflict among cultures than we realize. If you think back to the essay we've previously talked about, the nature of ethical disagreement, the attitude would be either ingesting the dead or incinerating the dead. The value would be the belief, honor the dearly departed. So what you really need to do is the same way you do with a person. Why do you feel that way? You ask questions until you understand why they're doing what they're doing. The underpinning of it. And the same with the cultures. If you ask questions to find out, well, why exactly are you ingesting the dearly departed? And you'll find out because they're wanting to honor them. It's a symbolic gesture. I don't actually think it's that different than what the Catholic Church would do. But I'm not getting into that because I don't want to, this isn't about religion. So, this is the idea. And what the author's going to say is by trying to understand why cultures do what they do and realizing that there's a lot more in common than we realize, it helps you have an open mind. And that's a good thing. That's the good thing about cultural relativism. And then as a comeback to the flaw, he's going to say, well, wait a minute. If all these different cultures, independent of each other, have basically come to the same conclusion about what is ethically correct, then there must be something to it other than just the cultures. That they're coming to this, so there's some truth here about the things that all the cultures agree with. And he's going to suggest that there are 3 values that all cultures agree with. And you know they agree with them because if they didn't agree with them, they wouldn't continue to exist. One would be don't lie. That's not to say that people don't lie. It's just saying there has to be respect for truth within a culture. Because if people didn't respect truth in the culture, then you wouldn't trust anybody saying anything. There would be no contracts. There would be no agreements. There would be nothing. It couldn't work. Same thing with do not murder. If you had a culture that basically said it's okay to murder people, and we think it's the right thing to do, well, then they'd all kill each other and there would be no culture to begin with. And the other one is caring for your young. These are all things that he's going to suggest that cultures have in common. And if they have it in common because there's some truth about them, something that's ethically true, then there is a standard by which to judge ethics. A lot of things are just a difference of opinion on how you express your values. But if you can come up with those items that all the cultures agree with, the value that they have in common, then you have something that transcends the cultures, meaning there's something more to it than just the culture, which means there is a standard. So the comeback here is, well, you're saying that scientific evidence has a truth, but ethics does not. Well, he's saying, well, yes, ethics does have some truth. And we can look towards what the cultures have in common to see what that truth is. And that would be the way you evaluate. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the challenge of cultural relativism, and I'll see you soon. Bye.